Dale Calder, founder at InSkill, CEO as well, serial entrepreneur. Obviously, my interest is in adopting or putting technology to work in the industrial sector, and we're working to kind of, let's say, push at scale the adoption of AI in the industrial sector for the purposes of improving worker performance and worker activity. And so I think it's a very large scale problem that we're working to solve. We're doing it in a very innovative way involving a marketplace that we've pioneered. We're getting our technology into lots of hands. Already we're in over 3,000 factories, and probably within the next 18 months, that'll go up to 20,000. And my goal is to have InSkill in every manufacturing and industrial facility in the world within the next 5 years, and to have the AI models available within InSkill, available from every kind of major manufacturer of capital equipment.
And Angelo, he won't say this, but I as an analyst who's a bit of a nerd that follows industrial automation and software, like Dale's a big deal. He wrote the code behind PTC ThingWorx, and he wrote the code behind OPC UA, which doesn't mean much to most people, but he's a proper industrial entrepreneur and innovator. So I'm a fan. Now the world is shifting back after 25 years of moving everything east to China. We're swinging back, and there's geopolitics behind that. There's economics behind that. And one of the key aspects of what's going on in the world is some rather significant government infrastructure programs. And the US, having probably been behind Europe for 10 years on green matters, has leapfrogged in a wunner with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a hugely significant program. But it's not the only one, but that is basically green capex to replace brown OPEX. And it's something that the world desperately needs. And that number is the projected spend that could come from the tax rebates and the government spending across renewables, EV, battery, carbon capture, nuclear grid, and a number of other categories that the US government is trying to push forward. But I think that number's conservative, because I think a lot of these tax incentives are uncapped, and I could imagine it could be as much as 700-800 billion. Then on top of that, we've got the IIJA, which is the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, the bipartisan act, which is 579 billion newly authorized money over 8 years. On top of that, we've got the CHIPS Act, which is 53 billion of money for bringing a domestic US semiconductor manufacturing base with 80% of chips made in the Far East, as you know. So when you roll that together, we're really talking about $1 trillion plus. And it's not just the US, Europe is trying to do the same as well.
Dale, as a founding father of the Internet of Things, you have been close observer of industrial manufacturing for over 3 decades. Tell us a little bit about the early problems you were trying to solve, and what's the biggest issues facing, let's call it, equipment builders and operators today.
Yeah, so Angelo, if you kind of roll back in time, early problems were really all about leveraging connectivity to improve productivity. So originally things kind of set by themselves, and the initial networking and then the initial networking over the internet helped those things work better. The things that we see today, are a whole new class of issue. In the previous kind of world, labor was never an issue. We had plenty of it. Today, labor is becoming a critical commodity, and with the capital spending being turbocharged at the level that we're seeing, having enough labor to drive that capital equipment, to maintain it, to operate it, is a real challenge. And the key problem we see in kind of onboarding this fuel, that's meant to kind of drive productivity on the industrial sector, is really expanding the human capability to operate it and onboard it. And that's where we see AI playing a huge role. So kind of our focus at InSkill has been to really develop technology that helps supercharge human activity in order to take advantage of the trends that James is talking about. And I think that's going to be, over the next 10 years, really one of the big themes of all industrial activity. How do you leverage, this capital equipment? You need to do it in ways that upskill the labor force so that they can do it rapidly and effectively.
James, a little bit of a similar question, but it's going to veer in a little bit of a different direction. You also have been an observer, more so on the global manufacturing side for 3 decades. Maybe a little bit of context relative to your background and how the companies in your world have changed also in the last 3 decades as you've been monitoring the activities.
Really, from the 70s to the turn of the millennium, we grew kind of 3% per annum on average. Then we had a ripping decade for when China went into the World Trade Organization in 2001. We saw a decade of sort of 7% growth. And then we saw a tougher decade. That had a resulting commodity super cycle in oil, which went up 20x, mining went up 12x. And then we had a softer patch, really, where we saw industrial stagnation, European double dip. We saw China try to unwind some of the excesses of their huge stimulus. But I think we're in a new era now, which is really an unwind, because along with that super cycle and China growing so massively, what you saw was a big drop in jobs in the West. The jobs went east. Everybody moved everything to China or to Thailand or Malaysia or other Southeast Asian nations.
Yes.
And that great arbitrage ended, and it's swinging back. So one of the key things is bringing manufacturing back, and more decentralized factories, smaller ones rather than huge, big economy of scale factories. So we're tackling these problems that Dale's talking about because there's such a shortage of labor.
So I think the combination of digitization, AI in the facilities, upskilling of labor so that you can do more with less and do more, quicker with new people, is really the types of challenges that the industrial sector is facing.
So it's automotives, appliances, off-highway agricultural equipment. These are kind of some healthcare markets, some of the markets that came back. And I reckon that we went from sort of 20,000 new jobs from US reshoring 10 years ago to 50,000 4 years ago to 225,000 last year. So I reckon the pace of reshoring is quadrupled. So I think what this reshoring story really means is we've got to go from semi-automated to hyper-automated. And so the amount of automation spent per unit of cars made, appliances made, ice cream made is going to go up. And that's an area where you want to be making kit or making software to augment the kit. To your question on costs, we're talking about 10% is raw materials in my world, 3 is logistics costs, about 0.5% is energy, and then you've got about 20% which is components, and wage is somewhere around 25-30%. But 30%, if you were to do a 10% increase in productivity, you could improve your EBIT margin by 300 bips. And so an industry that's got an EBIT margin average of 14-15% at the moment, that's really, really significant.
The connectivity has laid the foundation for driving AI to leverage it, right? And I look at AI not as human replacement. I look at AI as human liberating, and both in the commercial sector and the industrial sector. The industrial sector takes a little different shape, but it's the same sort of thing. Today we have people that one of a company that I visited recently are onboarding, 5 new people a week to work in their factory, and they have that many people leaving the factory every week. So, it's a revolving door, and the types of things that these people have to do take 2 years to master. These are not trivial jobs. They're not, punching a rivet. They are operating complex machines and complex equipment, and it requires knowledge. And AI can bridge that gap of productivity in time and help that person to become productive faster so that they become useful before they leave.
The world has to fix its rising CO2 problem. This is arguably one of the great challenges mankind faces. At the same time, we've got a whole raft of technologies coming on. But I feel like the capital goods manufacturing sector is in the sweet spot because the companies that are making stuff, they don't make a lot of CO2. Actually, I did some maths. In order to make €1, not dollar, I think in euros, €1 of sales is 75 watt hours in my companies. The average global number, looking at scope 1 and 2, is closer to 300, 400. But often capital goods is selling to companies that are 3,000, 9,000. So we're talking oil, steel, marine, chemical, paper, cement. So equipment, machines, and the more advanced automation and AI automation and industrial software effectively is helping the dirtiest industries on the planet operate more efficiently. And that could be a cost efficiency, but it's also increasingly a CO2 efficiency. So you think of simple things like the LED versus the incandescent light bulb, 1/10 of the energy. The train versus a short haul car, 1/5 of the energy, which is why governments are pushing trains as fast as they possibly can. A more efficient air compressor versus, or a motor versus a cheaper Chinese version. Take a compressor. The total cost of ownership over the entire life of the compressor is 70% energy, 15% the capital equipment, 15% the labor to run it. So if you have an efficient product, that matters in a world where people are scared about the price of energy. I know energy prices have come back down post-Ukraine, but everybody's had a sharp reminder of how much they want to get this right. And so we need this industry to work, but this industry has to also reshore to make all this stuff, and it's doing it without any of the skilled labor needed to do that. So if we can get tools that enable us to have a synthetic experienced workforce as opposed to a real one quickly, that's pretty good for mankind because it helps us pull those things forward, and we need to do that.
One of the things that InSkill does is we, help these capital equipment companies that, are used to drive manufacturing to turn their businesses into SaaS companies. We basically provide them with a new asset class. So today they have to sell humans. So they basically sell machines, they make money off machines, and then they sell humans associated with those machines. So they rent a human. And what we use AI for is we create a proxy for that human. We call it an AI technician. And so we turn these capital equipment companies into SaaS companies. And that's a whole new source of value creation that a lot of these kind of old school companies that empower the manufacturing industry have never had in their pockets. So I think these companies are, as a result, great investment opportunities. A lot of these industrial sectors have been kind of outshined by the traditional tech companies because they have recurring revenue models and they have, ways of growing that were more economically sound. I think that you're going to see a lot of these old school companies really start to close the gap because they're going to be able to leverage their expertise in ways they've never been able to in the past. And so my job at InSkill is to let them do it. And, our goal is to, help tens of thousands, 50s of thousands factories benefit from the monetization and the publishing of that AI-based expertise to, solve the types of problems that we've talked with.
For some of these industries in the more mature industrial sphere, like Eaton or Schneider or ABB or Siemens or Legrand, I think there's good growth to be had in both low voltage circuit breakers and products, or medium voltage switchgear, and it's that last mile network that's getting much more complicated in the grid because we've moved away from central coal and gas and nuclear, where we had a kind of motorway system of transmission, to a much more distributed source of making energy. And then I go back to my simple point, which is the world of manufacturing doesn't make a lot of CO2, but makes kit that helps industries that make a lot of CO2 save a lot of CO2. And that could mean motors or compressors or other things. And the most energy efficient versions of those are often the highest margin and often sitting in the hands of US and European corporations that have struggled for 20 years on those products, competing against cheap Chinese products that are not as energy efficient. I think that bar swinging back towards quality, total cost of ownership thinking, as opposed to just what's the cheapest product at the outset.
In the world of manufacturing, the data scientist isn't the thing. These models get generated through feedback. And, a lot of, what we do in our whole environment is we end up creating models around, all of these different types of machines and all of their applications. And both the machine level kind of operating and giving feedback and generating data, and the humans interacting with it, generating feedback, cause the systems to update their models. A global, kind of cooperation of these companies interacting with each other's kind of AI models, AI technicians in our term, and cooperating to generate them and to leverage them, and ultimately to monetize them. And factories monetize them by using them and improving their operations. Machine capital equipment companies monetize them by generating SaaS revenue off of them. People like help. And we kind of have a little message. If you're one of the smart guys, your job is to teach the AI. If you're one of the new guys, your job is to leverage it. and ultimately, the whole purpose of it is so that each person can focus better on the things that they need to focus on. The person that has 20, 30 years experience in teaching the AI, every time they teach the AI, that's one less question they have to answer from the junior guy.